record. Okay, so like I'm just trying to record this. I don't know. So this is my TechSoc document, which is kind of experimental. I'll just show you the date it was created. I've just been talking about this. So I wrote this before June last year, and I had a hard copy, but and people would be trying to delete this. I have copies elsewhere of it, and also this. If I can open this, like nothing opens for some reason. Like I can't open the files to show. I'm trying to open the files to show you anyway. Let's try and see. Hopefully it'll open. Like I was saying before, I feel like everyone knows everything. I've been talking about this stuff for like ages and ages. So this was a different document. This is a different document. TechSoc. Okay, so this, like, I feel like everyone should know. Like I've spoken about this for so many times. I feel like everyone knows about all this stuff, right? Anyway, this was a different. That's the PowerPoint. I can show that to you. But this was on my Facebook, so anyone's got access to my Facebook, everyone must know about that. So this was just me saying how certain things could be done, and one was with like a trial city. Yeah, I wrote a plan. Like there was a plan for like how you transition the entire, like a country or the world. But then I was like, you'd also do it as like a city. Yeah, so you need to calculate number of citizens needed to make it work, how many citizens needed to run essential services at any given point in time, essential services being those which are needed to make that city function, like sewage, waste collection, maintenance, construction, and all the other things that are, we identified in the pandemic. Based on the number of people in the population, ideally we'd have the number of people, that meant 3-month rotation, with the figure for working in public service roles. That is the secondary occupation allocated to those people, though they can choose the public service they wish to enroll in unless there is a shortage. That means they have their primary job is the one they choose, and then they have a secondary job in the public service role, which they work 3 months a year to keep the city running, so that then everyone can do what they want. Well, not what they want, like everyone's working basically. So this would, in a functioning civilization, be something that was chosen by children when they were growing up. Maybe at age 16, it would be 16 to 18, and they could start training in that area. This is this public service role. It's kind of like it doesn't matter that much because their main life is going to be the 9 months of the year they're not sort of doing public service. Public service is basically something to, you're contributing to the society that allows you to live in this amazing way, basically, where you can go to hotels, travel, because this all, in public service it also includes like transport and all this stuff. But like, because at this point I was specifically talking about a trial city, doing it in like a I was thinking like Starbase, like a self-contained city model, just to try, and you start with scientists and stuff. So the idea being that only 3 months of public service work would be needed by citizens. They are the 9 months they pursue training, what they are drawn to or wish to do, and are free to explore those areas. As all citizens will be required to do public service, it helps to create camaraderie, leveling status and cohesion. This is like a really basic idea that I've expanded on at length in the last few months. So this is like, I haven't had access to this for ages. Some people may choose a public service area as their main occupation. They will be the people in charge of those areas as above. This will be helpful in leveling people's status, as those in more high power areas will be working for someone else during the public service months. Things that should be promoted and celebrated should be things that help progress and contribute to society in all realms, technological or scientific. People helping, arts, as no financial reward, just accolades for contributions. Then the areas would only attract people who really wanted to be in them rather than people being attracted to them for financial reasons, etc. Would also reduce the possibility of corruption. There's nothing to be gained. The only way to achieve status, recognition, feelings of reward is through contribution and competitive excellence. These like things are separate. We'll concentrate on how the society functions for now. Like all the stuff I was talking about and all the world stuff, like stabilizing the world and stuff, that was like part of the like global picture as opposed to the city picture. But like it was supposed to change attitudes. So this would work better in the first iterations of science city, like a town called Eureka, as it's more predictable with less layers of society than when that is working at in other layers of society that are maybe more unpredictable. That would mean like what I'm saying is scientists are more predictable and probably more willing to kind of give up money in the first instance and just work towards like like scientific goals as opposed to people that weren't trained within that area. That was the whole point of using the renewables solar system to get people trained and into technological things and have people start thinking in that way. That's something I'll come on to. That was how to transition a population rather than just the city model. Okay, so this is also good, as it establishes science and technology as the forefront of society's aims before the other layers of society are added in. So they're more likely to change their focus into those areas, science, tech, progress, rather than the old areas, and get excited about progress and contribution. Precious metals and this was just a thing, need to be thought about. It's likely science, in a science, how people will be happy for all such materials to be used in science tech. Like, obviously, I'm saying to you now, since then, that there's certain things now where you should be able to get unlimited resources and unlimited resources, basically, with unlimited power. That was the point of the first phase of a phase one civilization, the first, how do you call it, stage? The first phase of a stage one civilization. So there needs to be some limit stipulation, but then that creates scarcity, which causes value. So had to come up with another solution, and that would be unlimited energy gives unlimited resources. That was the fix for that. It may be that it's necessary to say all metals and gemstones to be used for science and tech. Personally, I'm trying to limit the number of rules and to create a very free but functioning, happy society that doesn't need to treat people like children, telling when to go to work and meting out penalties for non-compliance. Obviously, I don't mean in terms of crime, that's a separate issue. I mean in terms of people's agency. I believe that almost all people would choose to work and contribute to given the right environment. This is for the reasons that everyone else around them were doing so and likely encouraging each other to do this. If they don't, they will likely be naturally stigmatized and become isolated as they're not meeting people through the normal work. However, we must also find ways for people who are ill, etc., to feel a sense of contribution and ways they can feel valued. There are many ways. And also a way for them to come together. That is lacking in this society. Just like there are Paralympics and the Invictus Games, there should be a way for incapacitated people to form working groups together, whether that's via Zoom or face-to-face, to create projects together or even be part of normal work via Zoom, etc., depending on their capacity and aptitude, so they can still feel they're contributing and part of a functioning group. For the real... Hang on a minute. For the real, rather than experimental city, thoughts on first stage of migration to cashless society, just in case I'm not around. I thought I was going to be killed at that point. Only at stage one at the moment. So I was partially writing it because I was like, oh, someone could kill me like any day right now. So stage one, energy independence. Eradication of any costs associated with power energy usage, both domestically and in industry. Almost this, you have to understand. This has been massively expanded upon in terms of like my explanation. I had to do this really quickly. So like obviously I've explained most of the benefits, because the benefits, the whole thing is like one gigantic system, and trying to explain that to somebody at the beginning was kind of difficult, but people are kind of getting it now. So eradication of any cost. So the way to get moved towards a cashless society is like one by one each industry you eradicate costs from that industry, like each public service role, like as people take over those, they become free. Like, so all the public service things become free, including power, but it has to come off of basis of power. And I write that here. Eradication of any costs associated with power energy usage, both domestically and industry, also mostly solves the climatic change problem. I'm sure people are thinking this way, except for the way I'm doing it, which is the eradication of any financial costs. Shit. Oh, shit. Something to take back up there. So, roadmap. Wait a minute. So, first stage, move, blah, 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 blah. Domestic. Just going to type. Have I just deleted something? Did something just get deleted? Anyway, first stage to move it's domestic. I don't know. I later calculated the numbers, which I have on a spreadsheet. So basically, I was just saying, don't know the numbers. Solar, how feasible producing enough energy to each house. Like, obviously, I know all that now. Leaving room for much better conversion efficiency in the future. Every house with solar panels, electric storage, is already partially been in progress. When home generator is fully charged, access directed to local backup storage hub. When full, access directed to national storage. But like, I have several things in between that now. So you have like a local, like road kind of area, and then an area hub, and then like you can have several, sizes. And basically the how do you call it, draw off the national storage hedge, like the industry and the businesses, they draw. This is like an old, like I said, an old version of the roadmap. Industry has its own local source but can access through the national hubs. In the event of catastrophe, power outage, solar flare, then the original style power stations, which shouldn't, I was trying to get them to get rid of any kind of nuclear except for cold fusion, except for like, the other. And this is why I was asking them about calculate the orbits. I gave them the models. So I kept ready. This will be necessary for the inception of the system, but may not be needed much later with developments. I say no personal to nuclear. I was trying to be diplomatic for many reasons, but the reasons for that was basically the massive problems they would call in the future if there was any kind of tectonic problems and we had no way of getting rid of it. It's possible to neutralize those things, but it's unnecessary because basically I knew we would develop a new power source. All of these things I wasn't supposed to say at the time, some of these things anyway. They were supposed to only be given certain parts of the plan and supposed to do them before they got the next part. So anyway, so the old style power stations may also act as a failsafe if, for example, we do need to put some CO2 back into the atmosphere at some future time. So what I was trying to say to them was that if we are coming into a glacial period, which is what they possible, but also maybe not, someone calculate the orbits. So I gave them the model. If there is a deficit within a local area, the local storage hubs will feed energy into local houses requiring blah, blah, blah. Everyone understands this now. Or maybe they do, maybe they don't. Possible at some point to have a global network for emergency power supply. That was once the world had been stabilized by the system, once the system had been built. That was the point. Freeing up energy costs, industry moves one limitation, allows quicker progress in manufacturing and farming. The functional costs are there, and only people and resources in terms of what needs used for the people. So the next stage is supposed to be like you have one currency and you eventually switch it off. People in power industry migrated over, how to initiate the inception, like how to actually do it. Like I explained how to do that. That was based off of the old financial system before the credit system they brought in now that I don't actually know about that. So, and then, okay, so money would still hold. So that's phase one. Eradicate use of money in one area. That's you eradicate it, and you eradicate it from one area, then another. It's basically power. The only things you need to pay for are power, number one, people, that is workforce, and resources. Those are the only three things. So you remove the power, the free power base has to be like first. And I said that they had to do that, otherwise they weren't ready for the technology that they would get from making power free. And it was like a fail safe. If you can't make power free, you won't get the upgrades in technology. And that's good, because if you are not altruistic enough to make power free, then the upgrades in technology you would just use and you would blow yourselves up. That's the fail safe. If you can't do it, you won't get the tech, which is good, because if you can't do it, you just blow yourselves up with the tech. That's the fail safe. So money would still say, that's phase one, money would still hold its inherent value in other areas like workforce and resources. Even if people stopped at phase one and made just the energy sector free, but making the energy sector free would likely enable more abundant and globally richer world, which would remove some of the disparities and inequalities we see between countries, lifestyles and access to service. This is what I was saying about scaling up the differences between countries, and then not being reliant on each other. So that's why it says an independent energy source for each, energy independence for each country. And then you stop war, basically. And everyone has access to resources is the point. So phase one should, for best chance of success, be completed before phase two. It shows that society or the world is ready to migrate to such a system, that those in power are willing to give up an element of control, which is fundamental to the system being grounded on a foundation that will last long term. It will also create a huge degree of trust from the public to those in power, and a positive bond that such an altruistic move is being made, which will make people accept and trust phase two. If phase one is completed, it should indicate that their trust is valid. Financial system is put online completely so that at some point in the future it can be turned off. When the end goal of cashless society is reached, there is no time limit, and it may be that it will remain. It shouldn't, but it may. It should technically become obsolete. Finance and money, once you have enough power and then unlimited resources, money will become obsolete by itself. Many future proofs must be made on such systems to stop it being abused, which should be taken with the utmost seriousness, and that's what they haven't done, because I am absolutely an example of where future proofing of the systems is being abused. So they're not following this at all, which should be taken with the utmost seriousness, as a failure at that level could result in the entire system or any system based on a purely online currency being destroyed. That was my warning as well. Building phase 3, no time constraint. So the building phase comes after you have the free power. Once you have free power and free access to resources, and you free up yourselves from limitations of money, you can build what you want to your heart's content. As long as you have people on board that are like, yeah, let's do this, you don't have to be constrained. At the moment, your scarcity is actually finances. It's a made-up resource, a resource that doesn't exist. You constrain yourself via a resource that doesn't even exist. If you took that away and people were just like, hey, that's a good thing, let's all like get together and make that thing, you could build so quickly, you could progress so quickly. If everyone just decided, hey, like, why don't we spend the next like few months like training up of how to put solar panels on our roofs, and then the government like provided them, you could like have the entire country like solar paneled very, very quickly, super quickly. Or like whatever power source you're choosing. I still think renewables are the best option in terms of being the less likely to blow yourselves up. But you could use LENI if you sorted it, but really renewables would be better. There's like, there was more to this document. And phase 4 is basically turning off. By that point, everybody's doing their public service roles. Like, I think I explained it a lot more somewhere. I've talked about it a lot more. Let me just do this one. So this was just the PowerPoint. This was, like I said, I couldn't put everything on these things because at the time, I wasn't supposed to share everything. But this was like, I was trying to show them real world at the time, how they could do it. So it was just like, so essentially this, you'd have a local storage hub. There'd be another hub between here, like an area hub. And so that the beauty of this system, so all of these are linked like as if you would have like a parallel circuit. So if one thing goes down, then I should have another thing there. Then all the other, these are hubs, these are storage hubs. Every house has a storage hub, which would keep enough electricity to last at least probably 24 to 72 hours. If there was some kind of problem, I mean, you're always going to have access to daylight, so it shouldn't really cause a big problem. But if there was somehow some kind of outage, then all the other hubs could compensate to that house or something like that. But basically, and again, any excess goes to the hubs, and then when that's full, that would go to an area hub. When that's full, that goes to the national storage hub. So if there's any outages anywhere, your first backup is your neighbours. And if for some crazy reason, like none of them can compensate, then you're drawing from the local hub. And then if that's some reason like not working, then you're going to draw from the area hub and then the national. I mean, that scenario is so unlikely. That's why I'm saying there's no excuses for any kind of power outages if you have a system like this. And you'd be completely safe in any kind of war scenario. It would be impossible to take out a power system like this unless you literally blew up every house and every storage hub in the land, which would be impossible. And even if you blew up the big storage hubs, it really wouldn't take very much just to rebuild them and feed the electricity straight back into them. But you wouldn't have any impact on the actual population, even if you destroyed the national storage hubs, because everyone would have their own power supply. This is the whole point. Then after this is built, then you once you've got these hubs, what you install into these hubs is a small LENR devices, or there's a small, more powerful power source that you will discover. It probably will be the low energy nuclear reactions, and then you can place that within that. But keeping the solar panels as well. Like the more power you've got, the better. Obviously, it's like unlimited power, and then there are certain things that you can do to create resources, like to create molecules that you need, like gold and whatever it is that you need. So and anyway, all I was showing here is that as this system was being built, until the entire nation was on this system, you just got the national grid. You still have the old style power stations feeding in and supporting the system in case there was something wrong, then until you're on 100% renewables and the old style power stations that would be carbon and nuclear would be feeding into the system until obviously you'd reached a point where you had a robust enough system that you could disconnect. Well, I mean, maybe you just keep them just in case, but you certainly keep the you want to decommission the nuclear and get rid of that, but you want to keep the carbon producing ones, like I told you, because once you've got this, the other part of this is it's a climate control system. That means at the time, the only way to control climate on this planet is to control carbon. And so you can, when you've got a system, a power system that relies entirely on just like non-carbon based, then that gives you and your cars and everything, right? Then you can choose how much carbon you're releasing into the atmosphere. You can control it completely. You can just use the old style power stations to release stuff. That was the kind of the partially idea, and you can sequester carbon as and when you need it. But I told them you need to find out exactly what's happening in regards to carbon. I gave them the models, the insolation models, and told them like 65 degrees north. It's not good enough. You need to use make a sphere with a grid on it, and you need to use the insolation data from the entire sphere on the winter and summer solstice for a 24-hour period rather than just 65 degrees north. It's like that was the problems for me with the models. I was just like, I don't know. Well, I guess they didn't have the computing power back then, but I was like, so you have that sphere and then you plug that into another sphere. The other sphere, you're using the ice core CH4CO2 data with the gas, and you can also use temperature from those, but the deep sea sediment cores also change in oxygen isotopes to look at the temperature changes that go along with the gas changes that give you the natural changes, the way the Earth is changing its carbon balance based on the amount of insolation and heat that's coming into the world. So like you have when temperatures cool, like when we don't get as much insolation in, and that happens from Milankovitch cycles. That is 3 different types of orbit, from eccentricity, obliquity, and precession. They're on different time scales, and when you add up those, like they're sinusoidal waves, and when you add them together, you get something that looks similar to the glacial and interglacial cycles. So the amount of energy that we get from the sun defines whether we go into a glacial and interglacial. That means whether the ice sheets retract or advance. And we have all of that data. So I was saying you can basically find the equations for the Earth sphere from that data, and you can tune the model until you have it matching. And obviously, like the oceans and the rocks, but mostly the oceans, are they absorb carbon when the temperatures drop, and they release carbon when the temperatures raise. Same with the rocks, and also obviously you've got the albedo effect. So you have to plug all these things and come up with the equations, and then you plug the insolation model into the Earth sphere model. And when you've got it modeling when you have it modeling the ice ages, you have to run the model backwards from pre-industrial times is an important point. So before humans have like interfered with the carbon balance, this will give you the way that the Earth responds naturally to changes in insolation and what level of change that causes in carbon, because that's the only thing that controls carbon at that point is actually insolation changes. You know, that tells you how much carbon is released versus how much insolation changes. That's the key point, yeah? That's the key point. So that data is available to us. And then what you do, once you've got the system, the model running backwards from pre-industrial times, modeling accurately the glacial, interglacial cycles based upon the advance and retreat of ice sheet data that we have, you have it, and you can say that you've got an accurate model once you've got it doing that. And so the best thing you can do is like use equations for each of the aspects of the Earth rather than just using direct data to model. Like you need to match the equations to the direct data, like basically. So you want an equation for the oceans, an equation for the land, the equation for the ice, and then once you've got that tuned and modeled, so that it's being accurate. Once you've got that, then you know you've got an accurate model. At that point, you can then run the model forwards, and you want to do that first without using any data from human impact. So that is from pre-industrial levels. You run the model forward and you ask the first question: when is the next glacial period due to start based upon insolation? When would it naturally start? And then you're like, how much time have we got from now? Like, how much time are we starting to go into that now? What's the deal? So that was the first question I said you need to answer. Do that. How much time have we got? Next, now run it forward with the changes that we have introduced with CH4 and CO2, with the carbon in the atmosphere. Now what happens? Have we mitigated the next glacial period or not? If we have, like, what happens? How much ice disappears? Like, this type of thing. And if we haven't, how much? Because we need to. The first disaster that we need to make sure that doesn't happen is that we go into a glacial period. The human race would die, become extinct, because if the ice advanced again, because we have nuclear weapons and such things, and we already fight over land and resources, it would just be a global war. Boom. Because there'd be very little land to crop. Most of the places that we live in would become like permafrost zones, if not covered with ice. And we wouldn't be able to grow food, all this type of stuff. And people just blow each other up. And then we'd make the situation worse because we have nuclear winter. So, like, we have to make sure that we don't ever go into a glacial period ever again. That means we need to melt the ice in the northern hemisphere, which is what I've always suggested since I did my master's. That is the best option. So, it's like the first disaster we need to make sure we've mitigated is, did we mitigate the next glacial? Have we released enough carbon into the atmosphere to make sure that we will not go into another glacial period? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I'm assuming they ran the models, but no one told me the answer. Then I said, so if we haven't, then run the models again. How much extra carbon do we need to put in the atmosphere to stop the next glacial period? And then, once you've got an answer to that, you have to figure out how to release that amount of carbon into the atmosphere to stop that from happening. And that can be done, reasonably easily, I'd have thought. If the next glacial period has been mitigated, brilliant. Now what happens? Now at that point you can start playing with the system I'm talking about and deciding what is a good number of what level of carbon do we need in the atmosphere to have optimal temperature, optimal climate for humans, essentially. Like what do we want? What do we want? At that point you can ask, what do we want? What's the best thing? Do we need more resources? Do we need more land? Should we melt the north? Yes, we should. In my opinion, absolutely 100% should melt the north. You can melt the north without melting the south. By probably only an extra 200 parts per million of carbon. I don't know the answers to the model, but my opinion is we should definitely melt the northern hemisphere and maybe leave Antarctica intact, though it's not 100% necessary, but like the models will give more answers on that. So those are the questions I told them to ask with regards to this particular model. Now I assumed that they found that maybe we're going to glacial period because suddenly the sun seems to heat up, and I was kind of like, oh, did they like fire a laser into the sun? I was like, I didn't tell you to do that. I said, don't do that. Did you calculate how much fuel was left in the sun? Like, I don't know if that was a very good idea. Like, you were supposed to increase the carbon. So I don't actually know what happened with that. I still don't know because no one tells me anything. I'm like, is there still another impending disaster? Did you fix everything? I did give them some fixes if they fucked the sun up. If they, like, the best carbon control, like now, like not carbon control, but like insulation increases, like, you can use mirrors in space. And I said you can use mirrors over the Southern Ocean, which the Southern Ocean is the biggest store of heat. It's the heat distributor of the world. So you want to increase the amount of insulation in the Southern Ocean. That is if you fuck the sun up, for example, like if we're going to get colder. Or it's another way to kind of like release carbon from the oceans and also increase the amount of energy in the Earth system. Like put mirrors and reflect the sun into the Southern Ocean. And also then to avoid the complications of the bipolar seesaw, that means that when things get warm in the south, they can often cause like meltwater in the north, which then makes it colder and you get mini ice ages. So you also then have a mirror over the landmass in the north to avoid the bipolar seesaw, to keep things temperate and nice and warm for people in the north. You can also then control daylight hours in the higher latitudes, which means that actually you can grow more crops. And you can there's probably better, you can live better basically. And also then I was saying you can also put like a net on the dark side of the sun, dark side of the earth, based upon solar or plasma sails to keep heat in the earth, to stop heat being lost from the earth in the night phase. So there's like one system. I was like, look, if you kind of fucked it up and we're going to get too cold, that's another system. You can release carbon, but you can also do this. I don't actually know what the problems are. I just try to problem solve things that could be problems, because nobody actually tells me. There's a problem with the magnetic field. I could probably solve that as well. I kind of gave them a solution to that. But, or if there's a problem with the core, I don't even know what the problems are. So anyway, this system is supposed to help that also. Like, say it was going to get colder, for example. If everyone's got solar and stuff on their houses and you've got the infrastructure, then like no one has to worry about light and heat, and that would be a good thing if things are going to go cold. So then this was a while ago. You have to understand, this is when we were still working in the old financial system, so this was just one way of transitioning. So this was based on the old system. I don't know what the current system is because no one tells me anything. But apparently they were working on my system now whilst making me live on their shit system. But the system you're living on is actually created by me. Oh, they won't let me show that slide, will they? So this was just like... Where'd it go? Oh, some of the slides are missing at the end. There's a few missing slides here for some reason. So anyway, this was partially, I was saying about, I think that the other slides were basically saying about how you would get the oil companies and such people to agree. So I was kind of like, well, what happens is when you're building the system, so the power companies and kind of the oil companies, but the power companies, they are not having to buy fuel anymore. So like their costs are going down all the time because a lot of the national grid is being provided for free. But people still pay the same amount on their bills. So people's bills don't go up and they still have access to the same amount of energy. Maybe their bills get a little bit cheaper, but maybe, they basically pay the same amount whilst the energy companies' costs go down until maybe they're at 90% profit. And then, at that point, once the system's completely built, like people won't notice, people are just paying the normal bills and they're told at the beginning, look, in however long, 10 years, if you agree to this, you won't ever have to pay a bill in your life. You won't notice any difference. Things will be the same for you. You'll pay the same amount of bills for 10 years. And after that, there'll be a switch off. You'll never pay for a bill ever again if you just let us build this system. Let us, you ask people to help build it with you is the point. But the energy companies are like, you can be like, look, you just help build the system, the energy companies, and your profits will soar up to like 90% within 10 years over that period of time. And you'll make massive, massive amounts of money, even though the consumer's not actually paying more. But because you're switching over to a system where you no longer have to buy fuel, but you're still taking a profit, it sounds unethical. But to get a system like this built, it's worth doing. It's like a golden handshake to the company saying thank you, or the oil companies, whatever you want to say. Then this was one way to bring power companies to the table, to be like, look, over this 10-year period, your profits are going to go up and up and up and up. The more you have incentive to build the system, the more you build the system, the more your profits will be. And if we agreed a time limit like of 10 years, the faster you build it, the longer you can have the highest profits for, until we go to a no payment power system. That's like your golden handshake to the power companies. Yeah, that's how you bring them to the table. And then after that, it doesn't matter. Like it's a win-win situation for everybody, basically, as far as I'm concerned. Because we need to transition into renewables anyway. And everybody's lives will be improved by it. Like I've given a million reasons, like it's stabilization of the world peace. It means that every person's needs can be provided for. You can transport costs, like hydroponics in every country, terraforming of areas in different parts of the world that then only require like power, say for example, to pump water or this, that and the other. All of this is free. You can do so much. The limitation we have only at the moment is power, money and fuel. If you eradicate those two things, fuel and money, you can do almost anything in terms of terraforming, in terms of making crops, making sure everyone has what they need. All you need to do is build the free power source, and that's it. And there'll be a massive, like I was saying, there'll be a massive technological boom if this system was implemented, because basically because it would become competitive and people would want to be designing the most efficient solar cells and developing all sorts of other tech that would complement it. There would be a big boom, and people then have to design vehicles and other things that run off this new system. So you'd have massive amounts of progress just from deciding to build this thing. And like I said, then those types of technology that you would gain, or like at the time, like you may have gained those technologies now. I don't actually know, one talks to me. Obviously, I wrote this quite a long time ago. Then that was the idea. But like that, if you couldn't do it and you couldn't give something for free, then you wouldn't get the technologies. But you can understand like how frustrating it is for me, given that I gave this stuff that I'm being locked out of it, basically. And so this was just like, I don't know, these last three slides were to do with like how to bring all the different parties to the table to get on board with the system. One was to the power companies. This was how to change psychology and get, that was the other way you get new ideas and new technologies, would be like, because everybody would build the system. So you needed a new workforce to build the system, like globally or within a country. And if everyone was, it was voluntary at the beginning, but like, so people could get, to encourage people, like younger people, they could get their education for free. So that's when you start making another sector free, that'd be education for free. If they volunteered to but basically went through the training to learn how to install like solar panels or renewables, or like just work in any role within the renewable sector, not only then would it guarantee them a job, even if they didn't go to uni, or if they went to uni, they could have a guaranteed job with a salary. But the salary for the first 3 years would be as if they were working for free for 3 months. So they're essentially like, that's the beginnings of the public service roles. So their salary would be like less for 3 years. They're getting their like education for free if they want to go to uni, but they would work for if they wanted to, like 3 years. Like it's kind of like, I can explain exactly how it works. It could be in any role, but then they'd spend 3 months working in renewables if they're in another role, and they'd be given a pro rata rate of that amount basically. But they'd be worked for three months of the year for free in the renewable sector, and then if they wanted to transition to that, they'd have their amazing job there. But the point is that if everyone was being trained in that area, number one, you get like a highly skilled population who could fix any problem to do with the system. Like everyone would be trained in the system. So if anything ever went wrong with the system on the road, like somebody on your street would know how to fix whatever problem came up, including yourself probably. But it also means that people that would never have thought of going into kind of technology or something like that would have some training in it. And these types of people are the people we want in the sector, because they will come up with new ideas that no one else has ever come up with, because all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, people that would never normally, it's probably only a small subset of people, and they come up with the same types of ideas all the time. So to have the innovation of people that may never have thought about going from the first, breaking all gender stereotypes, all race, religion stereotypes, like everyone just having this training and being encouraged to have ideas, would bring a massive amounts of technological advancement, because it would bring ideas that people can't even conceive of, because it would come from minds that don't ever normally engage in this level of in this area. That was part of the point of why it's like good to have the entire population kind of engaged in the system. Anyway, there's like so much more to it than that, but like I'm just showing you. So I think that created probably in, I'm not sure, like, because I put that on my Facebook. So that was in June 2022. I made that, but I've given, like, there's so much more to it than what I've just written there, because at the time I was trying to introduce the idea slowly. There was so much more. Everything I talk about is contained within the basis of having a free power system. Like everything relies upon that power is free. And at the moment, I have no idea what's going on in the world, but it feels like that has become, I don't even know. I have no idea. I have no fucking clue what's happening. But that was the way, as far as I'm aware, to save the world. That was the way to save the world, was the free power system, basically. But it hasn't happened. It was supposed to take between 10 and 30 years to build. Generations, so that like people in charge didn't get too scared by it. And they could eventually see the benefits of the system. But obviously they took aspects of what I was talking about and just made it the most. It reminds me of like Contact with Jodie Foster, where like the aliens send like the blueprint of how to build this thing, and they're like, yeah, you know what, though, we're gonna like add a chair in there, and like, we've got to put it there because we think it's the right thing to do. And she's like, yeah, but they didn't tell you to build that. Yeah, well, it's just basic safety. And she's like, so good for her. She's just like, yeah, I don't think that's a very good idea. It's like, just build it how they told you to build it. Don't do anything, don't add anything to it, don't take anything away from it. That's just how you build it, and it works. And that's what it reminds me of a little bit. So just build it how they told you to build it. How I told, like, just try and build it. that like you'll never have a power outage ever again. You can just build what you want in a really cool, positive way, like that United Nations video, you know, like that, you know, that would be super duper cool. Like that's what I'd like to see. Anyway, and that's it really. That's it. That's just one thing. There was all the other science stuff that I spoke about, quantum stuff, but I really don't want to talk about it right now. Feels like things aren't, I don't know. Okay.